Dear friends, good evening. Please join in the beginning meditation. Close your eyes, clasp your hands, cross your legs. Before we start the session, let's get into the right frame of mind. 10-minute meditation. Continue to focus on your breath, my dear friends. 3 more minutes, we'll start. All right, my dear friends. Right.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome everyone for this 2-day session on the concept Mind to Matter by Dr. Krupa Sagar, organized by Pyramidal International. We are very happy to see so many seekers here today with us joining this session. So, dear friends, what are you going to know about this in these 2 days? As Sagar sir has shared his first slide, the concept of the mind, what happens to the brain when a person does meditation, how the healing happens in a body while doing meditation, and how meditation can alter our brain and physiology. We might experience a lot of mystical things during our meditation. So, what is the frequent synchronicities? What is a local and a non-local mind? about the coherence, body, mind, and self. These are all very much fascinating words in spiritual science. So today, we are going to learn much more in detail about all these. In the recent time, Patriji has been recommending about the book Mind to Matter by Dawson Church. From that session, many cases masters and other seekers have been reading that book. We are very glad that Sagar sir is here with us, sharing in depth about all the concepts. My dear friends, so let me introduce Dr. Sai Krupa Sagarji. He is an accomplished technology business leader and a meditator from a long time, about 18 years or so. He held the position of Vice President, Digital Engineering at the global IT services company Cognizant till recently. He was instrumental in establishing several new technology practices here. In his career of 13 years in the IT industry, he has held different roles from developer to software architect to business leader, and he has worked in India, North America, Europe, and UK. Dr. Sai Krupa Sagar holds a degree in computer science and a Ph.D. in international business. Following his daily practice of meditation, he has a tremendous transformation in personal as well as the professional life. Now, he has undertook the task of spreading the word of meditation as a primary side. He's been the managing trustee of Pyramid Valley International, which is in Bangalore, the international headquarters of Pyramid Spiritual Societies movement, founded by Dr. Brahmarshi Pitamaha Patriji in the year 1990. Welcome you, sir. We are really eagerly waiting to know about the concept of mind to matter.
Thank you, Shalini. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you, my dear friends. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces. I hope I am audible enough. Yes? Okay, great. So it's been fascinating last few weeks reading through the books, having some discussions with Patri sir, and Patri sir's everyday notes contains the highlights. In fact, at some point he said, this is the content that you need to use for your presentation. And that's precisely what I'm going to do today. Dear my friends, so we're going to learn and hear some insights from some of the books in this field that combines neuroscience, meditation, and some of the spiritual science techniques. So let me share my screen. So first and foremost, my deep respects and gratitude to Brahmarshi Pitama Patriji, founder of Pyramid Spiritual Societies movement, and the visionary and founder of Pyramid Valley International and many more pyramid ashrams across the world. Brahmarshi Patriji spread and brought the simple practice of Anapanasati meditation in this age to millions of people across the world, and has been inspiring a lot of people like us with a lot of wisdom, a lot of these books, bringing these books out, telling the people what to read, sharing wisdom nuggets from each of those books in his everyday messages. It's been amazing combination of wisdom, meditation energies, and other things like spread doing vegetarian rallies and things like that. So it's been awesome. It's been awesome being part of the Pyramid Spiritual Societies movement. And this whole session wouldn't have been forth if it was not for Brahmarshi Patriji's motivation to spread this wisdom on mind to matter. So Brahmarshi Patriji, a lot of us got attracted to Brahmarshi Patriji just because of this one statement. You create your own reality. 17 years ago when I started off, this was the first statement I heard, which I didn't hear from anyone else. what is this reality? How do I create my reality? Right? So this was all more like spiritual science or metaphysical science. It seemed to be a metaphysical statement. Okay, you sit, meditate, you send out those healing energies, and then you create your reality. So, but since then, having practiced meditation for a long time, being with all the great souls, all the great masters, and after hundreds of meaningful coincidences, hundreds of healing experiences that I've heard, right? It always reminds us that there is some science behind it. Definitely, there's a lot of science behind it, and that is what this book, Mind to Matter, talks about. We will look at the science behind the creative power of mind. We'll look at the science behind this statement, you create your own reality, that Brahmarshi Patriji has been fondly spreading throughout the world. And this science is even more astonishing than the metaphysics. And it's so immensely fascinating that there are so many people who've already done so much of research around this, how mind creates matter, how mind creates reality, right? So as we start off our talk on Mind to Matter, here is the foundational book that we are going to focus on. Most of the stories, most of the findings, most of the statements, all of these come from this book, Mind to Matter, written by Dr. Dawson Church. He's a best-selling author and award-winning researcher. He also is famous for his emotional freedom technique, EFT, which is more about the tapping technique, which he uses in combination with meditation. Along with that, I've also sourced content, stories, and insights from these books. Your Brain at Work by David Rock, another classic pioneering work on how the brain works, articulated in a very illustrative manner by telling the story of a couple who go to work and then how they interact with their kids. So a very, very fascinating work. I read that for the first time probably 4 or 5 years ago. And then we have the impeccable Breaking the Habit of Yourself, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Again, Brahmarshi Patriji introduced us to this book a few years ago through another book called The Placebo. And then there's a lot of books that we read about Dr. Joe Dispenza, another famous neuroscientist who's documented whatever we're going to talk about in much more detail in several of his books, his latest book being Supernatural. And then this book by Larry Dossey, it talks about one mind. We'll cover more of the one mind tomorrow. And that was a segue into, we got into this one mind through this book, Mind to Matter. And then there is this another groundbreaking book called Stealing Fire, which talks about the technology behind all this. In fact, when we put up this write-up on our landing page, we said science and technology of meditative brain. So what is technology? Technology is nothing but application of science. So we're going to hear a lot of the science, and then how we apply that science in our day-to-day lives is technology. And that book precisely talks about how different people are using this science, neuroscience of meditative states in their day-to-day life. Even there are cases about how US Army is using, how Google is using amongst their employees. So we'll talk about some of those tomorrow. But these are the broad set of books. And before I start, again, I also want to thank my friend Chandra, who initially introduced this book to all of us. He handed this book to me, Patriji, everyone, and then the last few weeks, Patriji has been talking about this book for all the Zoom sessions. So thanks, Chandra, for bringing this book to our eyes and light. So what are we going to cover? So pretty much I'm going to talk about these three pillars: brain. We're going to talk a little bit about brain, talk a little bit about energy. We're going to talk a little bit about mind. And each of these, how do they create matter? How do they create the reality in our body, reality in our personality in terms of our behavior? How do they create our behavior, our speech, action, and thoughts? And also, how do we create things in our environment, right? How do we create things at work? How do we create things in life, right? How do you manifest things? So there's a science behind it. So we'll talk about how brain, energy, and mind combine together to create a reality across body, personality, and environment. And of course, how meditation is the solid foundation that enables all that. All right, so this is what we're going to cover. So as I begin, I just want to start off with a finding that was documented in one of Joe Dispenza's books. In a Harvard study, research subjects who'd never played the piano before mentally practiced a simple 5-finger piano exercise for 2 hours for 5 days. So they mentally practiced, they did not actually physically practice. And they made the same brain changes as the subjects that physically practice the same activities without even lifting a finger. So the point here is, just by mental rehearsal, the subjects were able to make changes to their brain the same way as someone who's actually physically practiced. Right? The regions of the brains that control finger movements, we'll talk about it in a minute, increased dramatically, allowing their brains as though they've experienced the actual playing the piano. They created new brain maps purely by thought. All right? And another study, it's another famous study again. So where over a 12-week period, 30 people practiced flexing their fingers. So half of them flexed their fingers physically, half of them just imagined that they were flexing their finger. So the group that actually did the physical exercises increased the finger strength by 53%. So the scientists actually measured the strength of the finger, the muscle mass and the tissue out here. So the people who actually practiced it increased their finger strength 53%, whereas there is a different group which actually mentally rehearsed the practice. They increased their finger strength by 35% without doing anything, right? So their bodies changed to look as if having the physical experience, as if they were actually doing the physical experience. I hope the audio quality is okay. So they actually, their brains or the bodies changed as if they were doing the exercise physically, right? So here, my dear friends, are 2 illustrations where just by thought, just by exercising your brain, just by mental rehearsal, you're able to make changes to the brain, as well as you're able to make changes to your matter in your body, which is your cells, your muscles, your tissues, right? So in both the cases, thinking, thought created matter, created neurons in the brain, created muscle tissue in the fingers, right? So as we're going to talk about brain, I just wanted to kind of also highlight a couple of areas so that we understand this better. And my dear friends, this is not going to be your usual meditation class. This is more going to be a science class, a neuroscience, plus a lot of other scientific facts, right? So bringing everything down, a lot of neuroscience and brains, a lot of content out there. I mean, all of us must have learned about this in our biology class, right? But what I want you to remember is just 2 things. The brown part that you see on this slide here is the neocortex, and then this bluish purple part that you see is the limbic system. Those are the 2 things that we'll be worried about or concerned about today. And then there is this brain stem and cerebellum out here, which is the reptilian brain, which will not worry about it, but pretty much will come up in all the pictures. So what is this neocortex? So neocortex is basically this upper area of our brain, if you're able to see me, right? So upper area of our brain. So the neocortex, or the upper surface of the brain, has different areas dedicated to different activities. The frontal lobe, which is primarily our thinking brain, right? I mean, there's something called prefrontal cortex here, will come there. So there's this part of it is the area responsible for motion, movement, area responsible for thinking, problem solving, analysis, rationality. All that is part of the frontal lobe. And then there is a blue part which is more to do with touch, body orientation, your experience of space. Then there is green one that talks about sight. All the vision is from the occipital lobe. And then we have the temporal lobe, this pink color area, which is more about hearing. Anything that you hear gets processed there. language comprehension, and memory. So underneath that, there is this limbic system. We'll talk about it, and then the brainstem and cerebellum, right? So please remember these 4 lobes. We'll revisit them as we talk about what changes does meditation bring to the brain and what happens during meditation. The reason for several things that happen during meditation, right? So this is the neocortex area. That is number 1. And what happens to the neocortex as we continue to learn, as we continue to learn new things? I'm sure people have joined us now, and within the next 2.5 hours, when you get out of this call, your neocortex would have changed with a lot of new neural maps being formed, a lot of new things that you learned, a lot of explanations that you come up with, right? So your memory actually builds tissue in the hippocampus area. And then, for example, there are different areas that are exercised or are highly developed in different for different people. For example, dancers, they develop a lot of mass, a lot of neurons get built up in the parietal lobe, right? Singers and musicians in the temporal lobe, because that is the area of music, right? And then artists will be more in the occipital lobe. And then there are people who do kind of the analytical work, so they're more in the frontal lobe. So there are different areas of brain that actually changes depending on the activities that you do. So and then there is this prefrontal cortex. So there is this cortex, the neocortex, and then there is this prefrontal cortex, which is right behind the forehead, right behind our middle of the eyes. So that is a special area of the cortex. I want you to remember that. That is the area that provides awareness, that provides us awareness. There are states in meditation we'll talk about where you are observing your thinking, where you talk about higher reasoning, where you talk about it directs. It's almost like a director of the rest of the brain that directs. And that is the prefrontal cortex responsible for empathy, intuition. And then there is a reason why we call this third eye, right? So all this area physically that maps onto that prefrontal cortex area. The second major area that I want you to understand is the limbic system. The limbic system is responsible for all our emotions and our memory. Some of you probably are already wondering, thinking why I'm talking about this, right? So it's all about emotions, right? So this has several parts to it. There is this hypothalamus, which controls our body temperature, hunger, fatigue, and sleep. There is amygdala, which is memory, decision-making, emotional responses. Anytime you're fearful, it is amygdala that wakes up. Anytime that you're angry, the amygdala that wakes up, right? So what it does is it wakes up and then matches whatever you've done with memory. Memory is what brings you those emotional responses as well. And then there is hippocampus, another part of memory. And then there are other parts which kind of control movements and thalamus. Pretty much limbic system, the only word that you need to remember is limbic system means emotions. Emotions and memory is what you need to remember, right? So 2 key parts that I want you to remember is the neocortex, responsible for different areas. More of your conscious processing happens in the neocortex. And then there is this limbic system, which was also the seat of subconscious or automatic responses memory. And there are a lot of levels behind each of these. So we're not going to go deep into those, right? So now, how does the limbic system work? What role does limbic system play in our body? As you see in this picture, anytime we become angry, fearful, anytime we exercise our emotions in terms of judgment, disappointment, what happens is, as I said, the amygdala gets activated. And then it sends a signal. There is a signal that happens through the limbic system, as you see here, among the different parts of it. And it releases a neurochemical, which instructs other parts of the body to release certain other neurochemicals. I'm just keeping it simple here. Depending on that neurochemical that gets generated, different parts of your body generates protein. And in this case, anytime you become fearful, anytime you become angry, it's all tied to stress. So what gets released here, stress response gets activated, and neurochemicals related to stress. They are this cortisol and adrenaline, or those neurochemicals related to stress. They get generated, and the hormones, the neurochemicals flow through your body, and different parts of your body automatically attract those chemicals and create proteins, better or bad, right? So this is how the feeling cycle works. So you get the emotions, there are some neurochemicals released, and then your body absorbs it. For example, if you're always in a fearful state, you're always exercising the stress response of fear, it always generates cortisol. And one of the functions of cortisol is it prevents generation of digestive enzymes. So what happens is ultimately you get things like you keep on worrying about a lot of things, you keep on being anxious, it generates a lot of cortisol, and your stomach digestive enzymes don't work properly, so you get digestive problems, you get acidity and things like that, right? So similarly, the emotion of fear, again, it generates neurochemicals that goes and affects your heart, right? And then your blood pressure gets dysregulated. There are certain hormones that get generated, and then it causes stress, right? And then your blood pressure shoots up. And similarly, the different proteins impact our immune system, impact our digestive system, impact our cardiovascular system. So all those happen as long as you're pumping the bad stress hormones, different parts of the body start getting used to using the bad hormones and becoming weaker, and then they start developing a disease. So this is what happens to the limbic system. So again, another research finding, another story that I want to talk about. So there was a study conducted in Japan with 2 groups of patients who had type 2 diabetes. All of them were dependent on insulin. So these people were being treated with insulin pills or injections to help control their elevated blood sugar levels, right? So one set of subjects, one group, was made to watch a comedy show for 1 hour, while the other group was made to watch a boring lecture. So the people who were watching the comedy show were laughing their way throughout the 1 hour. And then there was this other group, they were like watching this boring lecture in terms of what is this about and what to do, right? So after the 1 hour of this activity, both of them had a delicious meal, and then they were tested for their blood sugar levels, and as you see on the screen. So there was a significant difference between the subjects who enjoyed the comedy show and then the subjects who enjoyed or who got bored in the boring lecture, right? Those who watched the lecture had their blood sugar levels rise 123 mg, right? High enough that they would need to take insulin to keep themselves out of the danger zone. Right? In the joyful group, which laughed for an hour, their after dinner blood sugar values rose only half the amount, slightly outside the normal range. So there was an impact just because they were in a different frame of mind. There were one group was laughing, one group was waiting for what needs to be done, right? And then the researchers went a step further beyond just measuring the blood sugar levels. They also went and examined the gene sequences, right? Obviously, the person watching the boring lecture generated enough stress for them to alter their genes, whereas the other group also generated positive neurochemicals for them to kind of do some positive work, right? So what the researchers found was the joyful group altered 23 different gene expressions just by laughing at the comedy that they'd seen. So their elevated state of mind triggered the brains to send new signals to the cells, which in turn turned on those genetic variations that allowed their bodies to naturally regulate the genes responsible for processing blood sugar. And that is why their blood sugar level did not rise as much as the other one. So what this implies is our emotions turn on some gene sequences, turn off others, right? So our feeling signals, sends a signal to ourselves to do some things well and to not to do something else, not that well, right? So the laughing subjects altered their internal chemistry and in turn changed their expression of genes, whereas the same thing happened with the people who attended the boring lecture. They did not do much. In fact, they added a bit more stress in terms of looking for when will things will be over, right? So that's exactly happens. So feeling created matter. In this case, feeling, their emotions created matter internally within their body in terms of cells and genes and then the neurochemicals. All right. So what happens as we go through our thought and emotion cycle? I'm sure some of you have heard about these neurochemicals. I hope my internet was okay. So some of you might have heard about these neurochemicals, right? Serotonin is more the mood hormone. Anytime you are feeling good, that means you have a high of serotonin. Serotonin is a neurochemical, it's a neurotransmitter which makes you feel good, right? Dopamine is something that you get when you feel rewarded. You're longing for that cup of coffee. As soon as you get that coffee, you feel a sense of relaxation, sense of pleasure, sense of rewarded, right? So someone gives you someone kind of says, "Oh, wonderful! That was a wonderful lecture. That was a wonderful song. You did a wonderful job. Your mind, your emotion feels, wow." So that is more because of the dopamine chemical in your body. Oxytocin is a more a bonding hormone. Anytime you feel very bonded, more loving, more connected, more intimate with someone, that is when your body is flush with the oxytocin neurochemical. And endorphin is a painkiller, is also a pleasure hormone. Anytime you read a wonderful book, listen to a wonderful music, listen to something great. For example, people who probably watch the Jovial comedy movie, they're all generating endorphins because they feel happy, right? So these are the 4 commonly known neurochemicals. But then this book, Mind to Matter, also the first time I read in this book was there is another neurochemical called anandamide. I'm sure we Indians will pronounce it anandamide. Right? Anandamide is a bliss molecule named after our yogic Ananda, right? Satchidananda. So anandamide is a bliss molecule that gets generated only when you are in peak states of bliss. Definitely in those blissful states of meditation, right? And then a lot of other states of bliss. So that is another molecule or another neurochemical that gets generated in our body when we are in those high states of bliss. So these are the 5 neurochemicals that collect. But anytime in meditation, outside of meditation, anytime you feel good, it is because one or a combination of these neurochemicals. And then we already spoke about it. There are 2 primary stress-causing neurochemicals called cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol, we already spoke about that is the one that goes to causing all the harm in your body. And then same thing with adrenaline. This is another, is generated through fear. So if you look at this picture that it says, right, reduced hormone levels, weight gain, fatigue, poor concentration, whereas increased hormone levels because of anxiety, acute stress, high blood pressure, insomnia. So it's available out there. You can probably search and get more, right? But the key point here is these are the good neurochemicals that flood our body, causing us to heal, build immunity. Whereas these are the harmful neurochemicals that are the result of all pain and disease. So how does this all work? What is this connection between thoughts and the health of our body? Joe Dispenza goes deep into this. There's several pages in his book that talks about it, and there's several videos. I'm sure a lot of our masters also talk about it a lot. So changing body by thought, I'm just going to talk about this in this one slide. So if you look at the left-hand side diagram, right? So as we generate thoughts, good thoughts, positive thoughts, negative thoughts, whatever it is, right? So those thoughts build some of the neural networks, build the neural networks in our brain. As neural networks get created, depending on the frequency of that particular thought, there are these neuropeptides, which is these neurochemicals that we just talked about: oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins, and then anandamide. So they get created, or cortisol or adrenaline gets created, and then they send a signal to the cells. The cells in different parts of our body act as the receiving side. Depending on the molecule that goes along in our blood, they attract it. For example, cortisol is received in our stomach, as I said. So once they latch on to it, there is a signal that matches to it, and then it impacts the cell chemistry, it impacts the DNA selection, it impacts the regulation of DNA, which in turn expresses the genes, whether the right genes or the wrong genes, and then proteins get created. Proteins are the building blocks of our life. All of us know that. Everything is skin. Skin is protein. Hair is protein, right? Everything that we do, any muscle, any tissue, right from the neurons in our brain to the skin that falls away to the recovery that happens, everything is because of protein, right? All energy comes because of the protein in our body. And the way protein gets generated is, this is the action. Thought to neurochemicals, to signals in the cell, to DNA, and then expression of proteins, expression of genes, and then protein is life. So proteins control our immune system, our digestive system, our cardiac system, our structure, our skin, hair. See, for example, most of us have, initially, we have the right genes and the right proteins that give the color black. There are a set of proteins that make your hair color black. Over time, as we age, because of stress and other factors, right, the proteins that actually give the color black, they get deregulated. And then there are these other classes of cells, proteins that generate, which actually give the color, white color to our hair. So both are proteins, but one is a good black protein that gives the black color. The other one is the protein that gives white color. Similarly, the genes and cells across our body work on both, right? There are enzymes which allow you to digest very well, and there are enzymes which inhibit digestion because of various factors, right? Same thing to do with your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your liver, pancreas. Everything works on the different proteins. The quality of molecules that get to the proteins determines the action that it does. So we have around 140,000 odd proteins, 223,688 genes. So a lot. Again, there's a whole field called epigenetics that work on it. And then one statement I'm sure all of you have heard about as part of epigenetics is our traditional age-old belief that our genes dictate our health is no longer valid. If my parents had blood pressure, if my parents had sugar, I will carry the gene, but it does not mean the gene gets expressed and I will also get the blood pressure and sugar, right? So it depends, and a lot of scientists have done a lot of work on it. It all depends on the environment, right? You might carry the gene, but if you're not stressing that much, if you're not in a stressful mode, you don't add on to the stress like your forefathers did, you would not express that gene. Then you would not get your BP or blood sugar as well, right? So genes do not dictate your health. Your thoughts and your emotions dictate your health, and that is what all of neuroscience and modern science talk about. So diving into the first story from this book. So what happens in meditation? So there was this gentleman named Graham Phillips, an Australian astrophysicist and TV journalist who was very skeptical about meditation, who was made to go through 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation. And then the doctors started measuring his parameters. They measured his blood pressure. They also administered some psychological tests to check his memory function, to check his response time. They had a battery of both psychological and physiological tests done. So they established a baseline, had him go through 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation. And they also had a benchmark in between to measure his parameters, right? And then at the end. So the observation, here are the observations. After just 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation, there was a 22.8% increase in the volume, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation. That is the limbic system. We saw that in the first couple of slides. So the limbic system increased in volume by 22.8%. What does it mean? He was able to regulate his emotions much better. His brain response time enhanced. He had better memory. So there were memory tests given as well. He's increased cognitive powers. So they were able to analyze and do problems much faster compared to his earlier. Improved behavioral abilities, obviously, because he was able to regulate his emotions much better. He was able to generate better behavior. And he had a more relaxed and energy efficient brain. He was not using, obviously, there are tests. He was not using, even for the smallest problem, he was not using his entire brain, right? So he was able to kind of use only as much energy as possible as needed for that particular work. So changes in the brain happen in just 8 weeks. And this is all without drugs, without surgery, without supplements, no life changes, no other life changes. Just 8 weeks of mindful meditation changes your brain structure. And here is a chart that shows the brain area. Remember, we talked about the prefrontal cortex. I don't know whether you're able to see my mouse here. Yeah. So there is this prefrontal cortex we talked about. That is the thinking part of it, right in front here. So there were changes in that particular part, right? And then this is the limbic system area where he did this emotional regulation part, right? And then here, this is also part of the limbic system where other areas about memory and things like that. So pretty much all this is documented. So what neuroscience, basically what the book Mind to Matter really provides is, for us, it provides a solid foundation for us to move from a belief-based system to more an evidence-based system, right? Belief-based science to an evidence-based science, and this is all that. So what does emotion regulation mean? I'm sure all of you probably relate to one or more of these. Emotional regulation is about not getting ticked off by comments that your coworkers pass at your job, right? Not being annoyed with the behavior of your children. You might still be annoyed, but you may not be causing stress in your body because of that, right? Worried about the way your body looks and functions, winning and losing games, getting annoyed by relatives that you interact at a family function, the way you think your parents should behave, right? And then judging other people's opinions. So all these impact our limbic system, impact our emotions. Every time, oh my God, why is he doing it that way? Oh my God, he should have done something better, right? So those are the things that cause our limbic system to respond. It it ties into the memory system and brings back memories of, oh, that person passed a comment in your coworker did that several years ago, and then now the same thing is happening. So you need to analyze what's going to happen, right? So anything that causes you fear, anything that causes you anger, judgment, desire, or attachment, right? So all of those are related to emotions. What the slide, the chart talks about is meditation calms down the limbic system so much that you will not be annoyed or bothered or cause stress due to these incidents. All right. Meditation doesn't just change your state. It doesn't just make you calm, doesn't just give you concentration, right? It's not about changing the state you feel at the moment. It changes your traits, it changes your personality, it changes the way you behave just because of the emotional regulation and other things that we talked about, right? It changes your traits, which are your enduring aspects of personality. You become a calmer, saner person, right? So you respond to things rather than reacting to things. You are much more able to use your inner intelligence than before. What happens earlier, because of noise in your brain, whatever you wanted to express may not be coming from your conscious brain, conscious mind. You're probably coming from a subconscious mind based on some past history. So all that change, your personality changes, your personal behavior changes primarily because of meditation, and that is because meditation causes changes in the different parts of your brain. All right. So meditation helps you master your emotions. As I talked about, this is emotional brain or the limbic system. So when you learn effective regulation, like someone who was subjected to that test, you're able to control your emotions, freeing up the brain's memory circuits to run better. So we'll talk about, there's another slide that actually talks about what exactly happens when you do meditation in different parts of your brain. Okay, so that's in a nutshell about brain. We talked about the different parts of the brain, how thoughts may create matter in the brain, how emotions or feelings create matter in your brain and body, and how meditation helps in altering those variations, right? Even otherwise, you'll be creating stress-related matter in your body and brain, whereas meditation slows that down and ultimately starts building better things in your body in terms of generating genes that are causing immunity to be much better. We'll talk more about that later. So moving on to the second pillar of our the second pillar is about energy. So our brains shape our experience of the world. Always there is some activity that keeps on happening in our brain. Molecules keep getting created and destroyed. Neurons keep changing. Every time you learn, unlearn, there is this common thing, right? Neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So you learned a concept that is somewhere being captured in your neuron. The last few minutes, whatever you learned, there are new neural maps that are being created, right? So similarly, when you keep on repeating, okay, is my audio breaking?
It's somewhere in between, once in 5 minutes, probably somewhere there's a non-sync in the words and the action.
Okay, is it okay now, or let me just try switching? Okay, able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so internet is another, broadband, Wi-Fi is another energy field that we're talking about. Let's more talk about the energy fields in our body right now. So brain, there is a lot of activity that keeps happening in the brain, right? Neural circuits grow, neural circuits get deleted because of pruning. There is this whole concept of neuroplasticity. Earlier, people thought your brains don't change right from the time you're born, right? And whatever you have in your brain is how you need to lead your life. But then there is a whole field of neuroplasticity, which kind of gives hope for all of us to change our old ways, right? To become a new you. So new skills, things, learnings, every time you learn a music, every time you read a book, things keep happening, right? And then there are all these neural maps that created across our brain. So every time this activity happens, the whole brain seethes with electrical activity. There is some electrical charges that get handed off from neuron to neuron, right? So when these maps get created, the neuron passes some electrical charge to the adjacent neuron. There is a synaptic connection. So that is how they form the maps. So there is some electrical activity that is happening. And because of the electrical activity, you know how magnets work, right? So you pass electricity through an iron rod, what happens? It becomes magnetic, right? So because of the electric activity that's happening in the brain, it also generates a magnetic field. So basically, there is an electromagnetic field generated by the brain, which is what MRI and EEGs measure. And that is how the subjects in the earlier stories, the people were able to measure. The way they measure the different changes in the brain, they use this EEG to measure that, so that they may be able to map, okay, this particular area, there is a lot more activity. This particular area, in fact, once we get to the brain waves, you can even measure the microvolts the brain is having those each of those energies, right? So, and then not just the brain, all cells in our body emit photons. All cells in our body exchange the signals that I talked about. When you get stress, the signals that get passed on to activate this particular neurochemical versus this particular protein, it's all electromagnetic. So our body is a photo-electromagnetic structure, right? So light, electricity, magnetism create the energy fields in our body. And then we also know there are larger energy fields, the Earth's magnetic field that influence our patterns on our body. And today we go with hundreds of devices in our pockets. There is this mobile phone that generates electromagnetic field, right? And there are these earphones, Bluetooth earphones, that those work on electricity. So there are all these 3G, 4G signals pervading everywhere, right? And then your TV, television, all the electronic devices emit some kind of electromagnetic field. So we live in a energy field world, and then there is this thing about your body's electromagnetic field extends up to 5 meters out. So if two people are interacting, your field and the other person's field gets intersected, right? And then you can feel. A lot of us have probably done that, right? When we go into a room where there has been a very nasty emotional fight, as soon as you walk into the room, you'll figure out, hey, there's something wrong. I feel something jittery, right? So your body senses that feel. Similarly, when there is a room filled with laughter, the room filled with people cracking jokes, a lot of dance and music, what happens? You feel very energetic. As soon as you go in, you feel energetic. So all that is because of the influence of the fields on your body, on your thoughts, on your emotions. And there are these cells in each of, there is a part of the cell which actually receives these signals and cause those emotions thing, right? And just because our brains emit those electromagnetic fields, there is this set of devices called EEG, electroencephalogram. which measures, as I said, measures the brain waves in different parts of your brain. So they basically tie, just like a lot of you probably know ECG, right? When we go for our medical test, they kind of put all those patches in different parts of our body, around the chest and your arms and your back, right? And then they tie it to a meter, which actually measures all these graphs, right? Very similar. Electroencephalogram is something very similar for your brain. So they do all those patches on different parts of the brain. They know where the occipital lobe is, where the temporal lobe is, and appropriately put those, and then they measure the electricity that's coming out from the different parts of the brain. And that is how much of these studies that we are going to look at today and tomorrow, if we talk about anything about brain waves, anything about the different regions getting activated, all those evidences were gathered through devices like this. And there is also, this is an electrical measuring device. There is also a magnetic measuring device, which is MRI, right? Magnetoresonance, this one. So through your brain, mind, and cells, consciousness projects signals into the energy fields around us, right? Energy fields change depending on the content of consciousness. As I said, if you are feeling very negative, very, very down, right? The type of signals that your field has is a lot different. Whereas you feel very happy, feel very grateful, very you feel very loving, you feel very happy, right? So then the fields, that the signals that they send out is a lot different. That is how even in the field of our chakras and nadis, right? So we'll say all positive emotions happen at the upper chakras, whereas negative emotions are more survival emotions, which happen in the lower chakras, right? So consciousness can be controlled by changing our thoughts and emotions. We saw that in the initial couple of stories, right? And just have an idea in consciousness, send signals to the universal field through the brain, and the mind will cover more about that later. So these energy fields also shape our molecules, shape the cells, right? So each cell of your body, as I said, has an antenna, which kind of has its own unique electromagnetic field. It also receives signals, it also emits signals. Molecules are fields, proteins are based on positive and negative charges, right? So all of it is energy. There's a theory called string theory, which says everything that we see, our life, everything, all matters. They are strings of energy. Only thing is, things that we feel solid appear solid because the frequency is so low. They vibrate at so small frequencies that you don't see them moving, right? Otherwise, everything is built on energy. One other important insight from this book is molecules and cells are constantly being torn and rebuilt with the fresh material from the food we eat, right? And the controlling field. So there is always this thing about this matter come first or energy come first, right? Is there energy because of matter, or there is matter and matter emanates these electromagnetic fields, there is energy. So the finding from this book that documents some researchers, there is always an energy field. For example, if you have a cut in your finger, how does the skin heal, right? So the science behind it is there is the finger and the tissues, the cells around it, they kind of have an electromagnetic field around it. And the field decides the cells should grow along this finger, right? For example, if you have a big cut, right, the skin doesn't grow this way, skin doesn't go on the other side. The skin always grows where it needs to be healed. So the point here is the magnetic field determines where matter grows. So here is another story, case story from this book that talks about how each of us have some healing energies. So there was this experiment that two gentlemen, Dave and Bill, did on a bunch of mice. As you know, most of the laboratory experiments in medical science involve mice. So they took a set of mice, they injected it with some chemical that normally causes them cancer. It causes them some cancerous lesions and tissue. So they injected them with that, and then they started, this gentleman that you see here, Bill. So he sat with that particular box containing those mice. Every day he sat that and then stared at them and then generated or emitted energy, his mental and body energy to that particular mice, right? He did that every day for 1 hour to the set of mice, nothing else. So the baseline at that time was, in all these laboratory experiments, usually the mice that are injected with this cancerous chemical die in 27 days. Beyond 27 days, none of them managed to live. So this gentleman went through a lot of these issues. I mean, they saw even after a week, even after 15 days, the mice did not show any chance of recovery. So that the cancers were there, the tumors were there. But around the 26th day or 25th day, the other person who comes and looks at the mice, say they are, so obviously they had a control set also. All these experiments happen in two parts, right? There is a set of subjects or set of mice where they try the experiment, and there is a set of mice that is normal. So in this case, again, there are two sets of mice. In one, this energy is being passed, the other energy is not passed. So they were showing signs of disease, they were showing dull, whereas this particular set of mice was roaming around freely. And dramatically, after 27 days, the mice started improving, right? In fact, they got rid of the cancerous tissues. They were healed much better than the other mice. So the point here is, what it will do, he just focused his energy, healing energy of his hands. And every time he did the session, his hands felt warm, right? And we will cover what type of energy that needs to be probably later today or tomorrow. So all that he did was he gave it energy, and then the mice, without any contact, without any other drugs, got healed of those cancerous tissues. And this is not just about this particular researcher. He tried it with some of the skeptical students also who didn't believe all this. But he made them do the same thing, got them into that state of passing energy, and then they held this particular box. And then the same experiment was replicated by students as well. So the point here is, energy fields produce healing effects, local or distant, right? So you can provide it nearby, or you can even there's another experiment that I'll talk about where people try passing healing energies. All of you must have heard about remote healing, right? In fact, there is another case in this particular book which talks about how a person living thousands of miles away, right, cures his friend of a disease just by assuming one of the persons in his group. So they did group meditation or a group energy session, passing energies to this one person, assuming he's a person with the disease. And the actual person who was miles away or kilometers away, he got healed completely. So there are all these research things published in the papers on the book, right? So another thing, I think we already covered this, electromagnetic fields are everywhere. Stars, planets, crystals, rocks, everything emanate energy. In fact, there is this another fact that bees, when they detect honey in the flowers, nectar in the flowers, right, they sense the electromagnetic field to determine which particular flower has more nectar, or the kind of nectar that is ready to be used, right? So they sense the electromagnetic field around the flowers to actually determine. They don't go in and then say, how do they decide, right? So that is one. Even worms, insects, dolphins, if you look at it, whether people are around the different seasons, different climates, so the electromagnetic fields kind of impact their behavior, and then they also emanate a lot of those electromagnetic fields. And we all know, all of us come from this whole thing about Ayurveda, acupressure, nadis, right? So we have the energy bodies. We probably have covered those. So energy flows across the acupuncture meridians that our body has. We'll not cover too much about this, right? So energy fields are efficient conductors of information. And when we bathe our mind with uplifting thoughts, information, how do we manage, how do we control our energy fields? So managing our energy fields is in our hands. The way we think, the way we feel impacts energy fields in our body, right? So we saw the story about how healing happens, how the persons who actually laughed through that particular session regulated their glucose levels much better than the other group, which actually looked at a boring lecture, right? So energy fields get impacted through our thoughts and through our emotions, because every cell in our body is kind of energy fields. You have uplifting thoughts, wonderful information, wonderful ideas, your growing cells and a positive creative energy, right? Whereas if you're always depressed, always thinking about what the other person is doing, why things are happening, right? So law of attraction. So you're probably adding more to your stress, adding more to your negative energy. To be happy, the container of your mind should be filled with happy inputs and information. And this is where I want to relate to our dear Patriji's Swadhyaya and Sajjan Sangatya. So meditation by itself changes your brain structure, modifies your physiological, your body chemistry, changes your neurological state, right? And also kind of modifies your energy fields. Whereas this addition of reading books, every time you read uplifting books, every time you read great stories about great people, right? Every time you read about experiences, uplifting experiences of other people, your body undergoes a change. Your body cells are bathed with that wonderful positive information. Or be it Sajjan Sangatya, where you hear someone sharing some wonderful things, sharing their experiences, right? So it's all inspirational, anything inspirational. And again, there is a lot of science behind this. Anything inspirational impacts your body, impacts your mind much, much better, right? So your cells are bathed in those positive fields. So here again is an example of a patient, uterine cancer patient. I'm sure we have a lot of these stories in PSSM as well. So there's a uterine cancer patient who refused to take medical help and who just followed the healthiest possible diet, meditation every day, long walks in nature, kept herself in a positive frame of mind using inspirational books, ended all annoying relationships, and imagined healing stars, right? So 9 months she followed through this. She was a cancer patient. She was diagnosed with cancer at the beginning. And all she did was she made sure her thoughts and emotions and her energies were positive, were uplifting with a strong dose of meditation, right? So at the end of 9 months, there's no trace of cancer. So what it means is positive environment causes change in matter. So you don't need to create matter purely by thinking. It's also about the way we feel creates matter, positive or negative, right? We can heal ourselves when we adjust our consciousness to the frequency of healing. The matter of our self respond to the energy of our consciousness, right? The cancerous cells went away and healing energy helped them. As I saw, we described that mechanism at the beginning, right? And there are quite a few other case stories where I talked about this finger experiment, right? Where people were able to detect uterine cancer in women purely by studying their electromagnetic charge, right? The defect or the disease showed up in the electromagnetic field of their body much earlier than the matter created at the body. Even before the cells, even before the cancerous cells started showing up, the electromagnetic field started reflecting that energy, right? So the electromagnetic signature, again, it talks about a 1947 study where they studied the uterine cancer cases of hundreds of women. And then that is where they figured out that the cancer showed up in the field of energy before it showed up in the cells of matter. Let's say energy fields form the templates around which matter condenses. Again, very strong evidence about how having a positive energy field creates matter the right way instead of the other way around, right? It's not that matter that creates positive energy, though it does, but there's always energy before matter. So the point here is change the field and you change the matter. Positive thoughts, positive emotions, obviously positive things happen. Negative thoughts, negative emotions causes stress. You attract a lot of negative things, right? Ed bhavam tad bhavati, law of attraction. So here's another interesting experiment that was conducted by Professor Dr. Bernd Kroplin, Aerospace Institute, Germany. So this experiment shows, this experiment involved groups of people. They asked an individual to kind of take water in a syringe and then put 6 or 7 drops on a microscope slide, as you see in this picture on the left, right? So there were groups of people who did it. Every person put the syringe, took water, and dropped it in on a microscope slide. So the finding here was every set of drops, the shape and the signature of every set of drops varied based on the individual's individual. So what it means is the individual's energy field, it depends on the individual energy field, right? So, and then if the person did 10 drops and another person did 10 drops, another person did 10 drops, each of those 10 drops showed varied microscopic signature, like you see on the right? But those 10 drops of that particular individual had the same signature as you see here. The first row shows the signature or the analysis of that particular drop from one person. The second row is from another person. Third row is another person. So what does it imply? So we have energy fields. Anytime, in fact, there's another story. If you carry a glass of water and there's someone else carries a glass of water, so the glass of water that you are carrying is influenced by the energy field or your energy field. Similarly, a glass of water that someone else is carrying is influenced by his energy field, right? And that's what this experiment shows. And it also shows energy fields of each person is unique because the signatures are very unique. And then the same water experiment was carried out not just locally, very close by, it was also done remotely. For example, 2,000 people in Tokyo focused positive intentions on water samples in an electromagnetically shielded room in Petaluma, California. So Tokyo in Japan, California in the US, two sides of the globe, right? So people there focused their positive intentions on water samples stored there. And there were water samples stored in other locations where none of those intentions were focused. So at the end of the study, people figured out the samples which received those positive intentions showed a different formation of ice crystals compared to the samples that were stored elsewhere, to which these positive intentions were not sent, right? And this was corroborated by 100 independent judges who looked at the shape of the crystals that this water formed. So another great, right? It's not just about the energy fields that don't need to be local. They also can be remote. They can be distant also, right? In fact, there are quite a few scientists. Lynn McGart, I think there's one other slide we talked about. Lynn McGart is another person who does a lot of research in terms of global bonding. So she has a project where groups of people involve in themselves in group meditation, large groups of meditation, large groups of prayer, where they send healing energies to people in other countries like Ethiopia, Bangladesh people, right? So they send healing energies to people in places where there is a lot of disease. And all those studies have been published. So this is a great finding. So again, we're talking about water. Energy fields influence water. So our body is 70% water. And again, obviously there are different variations. So our body is 70% water. So what does it mean? We are best placed to be influenced by energy fields. We are best placed to influence energy fields as well. So that is why it's very important. Immerse your mind in positive energy. At least 70% of the matter in your body comes with that elevated state. We just talked about water experiments, and our body is water. Just change the way you think and feel, and your cells get bathed in those positive energies, and that's what brings rise to positive matter, right? So our minds create matter. We are immersed in energy fields. These fields change in response to intention or activity of healer. That healer can be you. It doesn't need to be an external healer, right? So when we change our energy fields, the cells of our material body respond. So before I close this part of this, before I close this topic, I just want to kind of quickly talk about one other fascinating story, which I read at least a few years ago, again from one of Joe Dispenza's book, how environment makes changes to our body. So this was a study conducted in 1981, where a group of 8 men in their 70s and 80s were shipped to a monastery. There were 2 groups of people. They were shipped to a monastery in Japan. And it was kind of a retreat at the monastery. So one group of people were told to pretend they were young at least 22 years younger than they were at that time. So they were just pretending that they were 22 years younger. And there is another group of people who were asked to think about what all they did 22 years earlier. So this group of people who were told to pretend were put in a monastery where everything that the place that they lived, the room that they lived in, the programs that were beamed on, the television for them to watch, the type of food they ate, everything was as if 22 years earlier, whatever was there was what was provided to them. So TV programs that were there 22 years earlier were beamed in their television, right? So the retreat, pretty much, there were all sort of environmental cues, right from the newspaper talked about the news at that time. Magazines were about that time. All the television shows and movies were at that time. Radio talk shows were at that time. Even the news, they turn on the radio, the news that they heard was also about the 22 years older. So what happened was, this group of people, they were living in an environment that mimicked the environment 22 years earlier. This other group, they were just thinking about what they did 22 years old, right? The results were absolutely fascinating. So after the 5-day retreat, and they just did it for 5 days, the researchers took several measurements and compared them to what they took at the start of the study. The bodies of men from both groups were physiologically younger, structurally as well as functionally, right? But the first group improved significantly. So in fact, there were people, if you look at it, there were people in 70s and 80s, right? So people who went with their back bent, who were not weak, right? So because their environment created that they were 22 years younger. So they were people who were walking with a stick when they went in, they were able to walk straight, right? Some people, eyesight and hearing got better. The men grew taller, the joints became more flexible, fingers lengthened, and some of them who had arthritis, it vanished, right? Their grip strength improved, their strength improved. And they also went through some mental and psychological tests. So they scored better, indicating better memory than when they started off, right? So the men literally became younger. Both the body cells, muscles, tissues became younger, the brain became younger, just because the environment changed, reminding them of what they did 22 years ago. So what does it show? So it all shows about how our thoughts and emotions and the environment that we live in shapes our body, shapes our matter, shapes the way we think. And then, or inversely, whatever we are, it's a product of our thoughts, of our emotions. And you change your thought, as I say, we are just one thought away from creating that miracle, one thought away from manifesting what we want, right? And to remain materialists, there's a choice we have, right? So we can either choose the material path using material solutions like pills, surgery, drug. So E equal to MC squared is a famous equation, Einstein. So you can change the matter and then still get what you want. But working at the level of energy frees us from the tyranny of matter. So matter always has its side effects, right? We address our problems. Again, as I said, energy comes first, matter comes next. So most of the time, we address problems at the level of the effect, which is the matter. If you're able to take care of things at the level of energy, we address our problems at the level of cause rather than the effect. So it's very important. This particular insight is very important because we generate cells every second. Every second, 810,000 cells are being replaced. Our body produces 1 trillion blood cells per day. Lifetime of a blood cell is 4 months. And the book talks about a huge table, right? And we have 84 billion neurons in the brain. And every second, 1 neuron gets replaced. And your heart regenerates at least 3 times in a lifetime. And then there are different body parts which have their own regeneration cycle. So it's not too late for all of us, right? So even now, if we take a conscious decision to maintain our energy field in a positive manner, in an elevating manner, we can create matter in our body, matter in our behavior, matter through our behavior, much better than we did before, right? So there is still hope for all of us and a lot of us, right? So every time, every day. So tomorrow, for example, once I hear this topic, once you go off from this session, tomorrow you start off your day with a wonderful session of meditation, some uplifting music, some uplifting story, some inspirational book. You are bathing your new cells that are being replaced tomorrow, new tissues that are being replaced tomorrow in that positive energy, in the flood of those positive energy, the flood of love, and the flood of kindness, right? So everything grows electromagnetically well, physically well. So to do that, obviously, our thoughts and emotions are one ingredient for building matter in our body, right? Fundamental building blocks of our body continuously turn over. And our bodies are programmed to heal. And what happens, one of the other ingredients is eating high quality food, eating pranic food, right? Results obviously in high quality proteins and cells. And there's a good analogy if you have a factory of cars, right? Obviously, when you go buy a car, you need the highest quality, top performing, a car that doesn't break down for a long time. How does it happen? It happens only if the car is built with top quality raw materials, right? The best steel, best aluminum, best gearbox, best rubber, and obviously the best combustion engine. If the car is built with inappropriate raw materials, obviously the car tends to break down much sooner. Very similar is our body, right? Our body needs exceptional raw materials to be built for building the right way, for us to think the right thoughts, for us to feel the right energies, right? For us to build the right tissues, for us to heal ourselves. So that's where food is one important ingredient that matters in the creation of matter. So I think we covered the cells. Emotions shape the world around us as well. And then there is one story that I talk about, increasing heart coherence at a distance. So just like people were able to influence energy fields from between Japan and California, there is also the other study by Leskowitz from Harvard University, who just changes his heart coherence, right? So basically he was sitting and there were a set of people behind them who got into a coherent field through meditation. And then just because the people standing behind him, right, changed their heart coherence, he was just sitting a few meters away from them. A change in heart coherence of this person caused a change in heart coherence of Leskowitz, the person who was doing the research, right? Again, another big study that shows how energy fields impact. And they were not just doing this, they were also succeeded in doing a follow-up study of 25 volunteers in 148 10-minute trials, heart entrainment at distance, again, across cities. They were able to do the same thing, right? They were able to, one person was able to bring their heart into coherence based on the heartbeats that they have, and then the other person was able to replicate that without doing anything. So positive emotions and negative emotions is emotional contingent, right? So there are these people. If you are positive, if you work in a family, if you are in a family, you work in a team. So if you are positive, the positive energy fields radiate and spread across your team, across the family, right? Across the group. That is why we say, right, group energies are very, very significant. And anytime we do a project, anytime it's very important that all of us are in a positive frame of mind. Just one person thinks that something cannot be achieved, then he goes into a downward spiral. It pulls down the energies of the group. And there is a lot of science behind to show that group energies are very important. So again, meditation, coming to meditation. So there is this wonderful finding that says in just one session of meditation, there's a 2013 study, in just one session of meditation, both for novice beginners and experienced meditators, they were able to show gene expression changes. Their immune function genes, their energy metabolism genes, their insulin secretion genes upregulated, right? And then their inflammation and stress causing genes downregulated with just one session of meditation. And then believe me, as I know all of you go through 21 days and 40 days, and a lot of people do daily meditation. We are fortunate to have known this recipe from Brahmarshi Patriji. So we are upregulating our immune system. We are upregulating positive energies and positive cells and downregulating the stress causing cells. And that is the whole reason we each of the meditators is probably a lot more better, healthier, emotionally healthier, physically healthier compared to people who are causing stress themselves. And there's another study from Boston, 20 volunteers, 8 weeks of mind-body training, and then 19 of which 19 long-term daily practitioners, 20 new people, new meditators, and 19 long-term meditators. And they measured the gene expressions at the end of 8 weeks. Again, it's a very similar result. Just the beginners who learned meditation 8 weeks, they were able to upregulate 874 genes for better health and downregulated stress-causing genes. Whereas obviously the experienced meditators upregulated a lot more or regulated more of their genes, right? So that's a good segue for us to kind of get involved in a brief 5-10 minute meditation session, my dear friends, to just kind of recollect whatever we've learned so far on the brain and energy before we move to another section of today's talk. And it also gives us a chance for our bodies to generate those healing positive energies through meditation, and obviously upregulate some of the good genes and downregulate some of our genes within this 10 minutes. All right, my dear friends, let's get into brief 10-minute breath meditation. I'm sure all of you know the procedure. Please remove your spectacles. Close your eyes, clasp your hands, cross your legs, get into a comfortable posture. Make your brain, body silent and still. Settle into a comfortable posture, my dear friends. Slowly start observing your breath. Just observe the movements in your body due to your breathing. As you breathe in and breathe out, become conscious of your beautiful breath. Do not allow any thoughts. Just keep your attention on your breath. Feel grateful for the wonderful gift of our body, of our brain, the wonderful mechanism of life. Feel grateful for the wonderful wisdom of the masters. Just observe your normal, natural, gentle breath, my dear friends. Feel the breath fully, wholly, completely. Let's be grateful to the magnificence of our brain, the marvel of your cells, the energy of life, the wisdom of creation, and the experience of being human. Being with the breath allows us to be in homeostasis, which is being with our normal, natural state. Do not think, do not analyze anything. Your breath is your guru. Being with the breath is all that is needed for us to live a life of magnificence. There is deep science behind this. Feel the positivity in you. Feel thankful for all the wonderful things. Just be with your breath, my dear friends. Everything else can wait. Allow the information and insights that you just learned to seep into your consciousness. Not through thinking, but through feeling. Just 2 more minutes. All right, my dear friends. Place your palms on your eyes for a few seconds and bring your awareness back to the session. I hope all the information and insights that we've been speaking about, that I've been presenting, does make sense. It of course does make sense. It's only a question of how much of information I am flooding within this last 1 hour, 45 minutes or 1.5 hours. So stay with me for another half an hour or 40 minutes. We're going through the most interesting part of today's session. I'm sure tomorrow's will be a lot more interesting. I'll talk about it why towards the end of the session. Shalini, audio is okay, right?
Yes, that's fine.
All right, so we probably covered much of this earlier. What happens to the brain in meditation? Why are we? There are some experiences that we get in meditation that can be answered by looking at or studying the brain structure. If you look at it, I think there's a bit of a fuzzy picture here. We saw this picture at the beginning of our session. right? There is this frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex. There is one part of the brain which is more prone to movements and space. So parietal lobe is the part of the brain that allows us to feel space. Anytime you step your foot on a stairs, right? The reason that you're able to keep your foot exactly on the stair and not beyond the edge of the stair is because your parietal lobe is working fine. It kind of gets to know the space, the boundary between you and something else. The occipital lobe is more the visual processing. Temporal lobe is sound and speech and all that, right? So what happens in meditation? So in meditation, we try to bring our attention to one thing. In our case, in case of Anapanasati meditation, we always bring our attention to the breath. Breath is a function that happens automatically, right? It's part of the autonomic nervous system. So it happens continuously. So we are placing all our attention on the breath. As we continue to place our attention on the breath, what happens? We keep getting a lot of thoughts, right? So thoughts happen here. There's a low part. So we keep getting thoughts. We try and bring our attention back to the breath. We keep getting thoughts. We try and bring attention back to our breath. So over time, as we continue to the first milestone of meditation, as we say, is bringing your attention, constant attention to your breath. If you're able to focus attention on your breath for 1 full minute, that's a big milestone. First milestone. Congratulations, right? If you're able to do that for 10 minutes, amazing. So what happens as we focus our attention completely on one part, the entire energy of the brain focuses on one region. In this case, if you look at it, slowly the breath is part, or the awareness, being conscious, is a part of the prefrontal lobe. So all energy is focused on that part of the brain. So what happens? Energy is now slowly becoming less, or the volume of activity in the other parts of it get reduced, right? So slowly what happens? You start not hearing noises, right? You'll start not feeling. Initially, you probably were bothered by noises, sounds. Initially, you're bothered by itches. You're bothered by some sights, right? Visions and all that stuff. So all those will slowly die down, right? As your thinking brain calms, whatever was part of each of these brains surface. That is why some of you see flashes of light. Some of you hear some strange sound which is not there outside. So all those are because some of these brain regions get activated because your thinking brain or the frontal lobe is not active, because you're subdued or reduce the volume of the noise in that frontal lobe, the other parts start getting activated. Over time, the entire part of the brain becomes silent. No activity happens in the brain except your prefrontal cortex. All your energy, all the energy is focused on attention to your breath. So what happens? Over time, we lose track of space and time, which is because your parietal lobe goes silent. You don't hear any outside noises. You feel an immense sense of calm because your temporal lobe becomes silent. You are obviously pitch dark because your visual processing is silent, right? And you don't feel any movement, any space, because as I said, just like your kinesthetic is silence. So everything is silence. You absolutely lose track of who you are. You absolutely lose track of your own self. You lose track of your conscious self because all your attention is focused on your breath, right? And that is when a lot of other experiences start happening. Right? In fact, Patriji was talking about an example recently. He talked about how Vivekananda, when he was meditating in an ashram, someone went and looked at him after a couple of hours. He was blanketed with a full thick black blanket of mosquitoes, right? So what happened there? The mosquitoes were biting. Yes, they were biting, but he was not feeling them because this part, or the parietal lobe, which is responsible for the somatosensory, all the touch, completely went zero. Because though they were biting, he was not feeling them, right? Similarly, a lot of people, we think, okay, I didn't know I meditated for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It just went by, because you lose track of time, again, the parietal lobe. So that is how the brain works in meditation, right? As you do that, the different parts of the brain fall silent, and then all energy focuses on attention. And that is where a lot of other things start happening, right? And as I said, even your emotional, the limbic system also becomes silent. And that is where you're able to respond faster, your subconscious mind. Okay, so when we are trying to focus our attention on the breath at the beginning, in our early stages, right? A lot of these thoughts that keep coming, they're not conscious, they're out of our control, they're involuntary. Much of those involuntary thoughts, unconscious thoughts, start coming from our limbic system. These are the ones that keep saying, hey, why are you meditating? Oh, this pain, that pain. Yesterday I didn't get experiences. Yesterday was calm. Today, hopefully it's calm. All those emotions, all those thoughts, energy-driven thoughts come from this limbic system. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that happens is as energy flows to different parts of the brain, your limbic system also becomes silent, right? And as it becomes silent, your thoughts coming from your subconscious also become silent. Over time, it's all calm. And when people lose track of space, that is when they feel very light, right? They feel they are floating. They don't feel the body conscious because all the other parts of the brain became silent, right? So that is the neuroscience behind all those experiences that we undergo during meditation. The other part of it, which I want to cover, is brain waves. What happens in meditation? Once we reach that silent state, right, then your brain waves also go to different frequencies. So what are these brain waves? So just like when you go to a performance, there is this, let's say, very rhythmic clapping. Everyone claps at the same time, right? Initially, let's say you're giving a standing ovation, right? So everyone starts clapping at the same time, right? And then slowly it becomes faster, slowly it becomes bigger. So basically that rhythm is what is at frequency. Just like that, your brain operates at particular frequency. It operates at certain rhythm. The different parts of your brain operates at different frequencies, right? And these frequencies, as I said, is measured by this EEG. So like the picture that I showed, it's like the ECG for the brain. And Hans Berger has invented this initial EEG, right? So through that, researchers, there's a huge amount of documentation out there that talks about brain waves. And our brain functions, there are at different times of our day, our brain functions or the brain waves oscillate at different frequencies. All right, so before I get into those brain waves, right? So I just want to also kind of highlight some of the studies I'm going to mention as we go through this brain waves. Then we'll also talk about what happens during meditation for the brain waves. There are these key biomarkers of health, right? How do you measure your health? How do you see? How do you think? How do you measure changes due to this brainwave changes and meditation? Right? There are these 4 metrics. Number 1 is number of circulating stem cells. I'm sure some of you know what are stem cells. Stem cells are multi-purpose or general purpose cells that go attached to any part of your body to grow a specific type of cell. For example, if you have a cut in your finger, you need skin cells, right? If you have an infection in your tummy, you need stomach cells. Similarly, if you want healing to happen in your heart or any other part, you need that kind of cells. Similarly, eye cells, ear cells, right? So these cells are available in our body. They provide very fast repair and healing. So the number of cells you have, the faster you recover from diseases, because these cells go and supplement the function, take over the function of that particular diseased part of the body. So that's number 1. Second one is growth hormone levels. The level of growth hormones increases or decreases. So it gets better during sleep. So deep sleep provides that particular hormone. And there's another thing called free radical, which is just oxygen has 2 cells. Sometimes having more free radicals, it's a sign of stress. It also provides aging. And then the other big thing is about length of telomeres in our DNA, right? So they provide the longer telomeres means you are young, right? As you age, the shorter your telomeres become shorter. There's a deep science behind it, right? So as we continue to look at research of the brain waves, each of the brain waves, each of the state of your brain has an influence on these health markers. So let's begin with gamma brain waves. So gamma brain waves are the fastest brain waves, and these occur when we are seriously, deeply involved in some work, in some deep intellectual work, deep analysis work, thinking about something, or even getting deeply involved in some work, some maybe cooking, maybe playing music, whatever it is, right? Anytime we feel we are in the zone is when our brain oscillates at this gamma wave frequency. So 32 hertz to 100 hertz, right? And then this set of brain waves bring a lot of physiological and neurological changes. They trigger, we heard the gene cycle, right? So a certain set of brain functions generates a certain set of genes. So in this case, these trigger genes that produce anti-inflammatory proteins. So your body's inflammation levels go down, stem cells increase. They regulate the expression of stress genes and other genes, right? Increases DNA synthesis. So all these happen when your brain is operating at this particular frequency. When does it operate? When you are involved in deep, distraction-free work. All right. And then the next frequency band of brain waves is beta brain waves. So this most of the day, most of the time, we are in beta. So we are in this 13 to 32 hertz. When you are stressed, when you are anxious, oh my God, what is this class going to be? Oh my God, someone next door has COVID. Will that fly, will the virus fly and come into my house? Am I recovering right? Right? So when you are anxious, when you don't know, when you have this fear, when you have this anger, that is when we are in this high beta state, which is the 15 hertz to 32 hertz. So when we are anxious, we are in high beta state. When you are thinking too much, when our monkey mind is completely distracted, we are the monkey mind stage, we are in high beta stage. And that high beta state is the stress causing state. Remember one of the first slides where I showed how stress causes cortisol to be released and it causes some disease causing genes to be expressed. So anytime your brain is in this high beta stage, that means that stress neurochemicals like cortisol and adrenaline gets generated. So negative emotions, anger, fear, guilt, everything produce huge waves of high beta. So when the brain is oscillating at high beta, when you're so anxious, the blood flow to your thinking brain goes down. So your limbic system is very active. You're angry, whereas your blood flow to your thinking, that is why we don't think right when we are angry. We don't think rationally when we are fearful. We don't think logically when we are anxious, right? So that is because there's not enough focus here. Most of the focus is in the limbic brain, and our whole body is trying to beat that fight or flight mode, right? We are in the survival mode. So fear and anxiety causes to be in the beta stage. So high beta is harmful. Mid beta is where we normally function. When I'm talking to you, if I'm anxious, if I'm a first time speaker, I'll be a lot more anxious. Am I talking right? How am I going to do? Oh, my internet connection is bad, whatever it is, then I'm anxious. I'm in high beta. But if I'm not, I'm talking to you in a calm mode, so then it's probably a lot more safer. So most of the time, most of the day, we operate in that mid beta, which is more between 15 to 20 hertz, 25 hertz, right? And then there is low beta, which is a 13 to 15 hertz, which is a sensory motor rhythm. That is the frequency required for all our biological functions to happen, autonomic biological functions to work, which is your heartbeat, your blood pressure, your flow, circulation of the blood, all that function happen. That is more the calmer part of it. So beta is bad, low beta is good, right? And then what is better? Alpha. So alpha brainwaves operate at 8 to 13 hertz, and this is a state of relaxed awareness. It enhances we talked about the neurochemical serotonin, it enhances your mood, it repairs DNA effectively, repairs gene expression, your memory starts functioning well, right? Improves overall brain function. And all these facts can be measured in the chemicals set in our body when we get into alpha state. When do you get into alpha state? Your brain waves get into alpha state when you are just beginning to sleep. Your brain waves get into alpha state when you close your eyes. Your brain waves get into alpha state when you start beginning to start your meditation. Your brain waves get into alpha state when you hear a piece of relaxing music. You're reading an inspirational book. So that is when your brain calms down. If you have your electrodes, EEG on it, and you start doing it, the EEG meter will show you your brain waves is at 8 to 13 hertz during that time. So alpha is good. I'll talk about why it is the best when we get into the working of meditation. Then the next slower band is a theta brainwaves. This is characteristic of light REM, rapid eye movement sleep. It's commonly observed in healers. Theta is pretty much a healing frequency, right? Most healers who use energy to heal their brains, they get into that mode where the brains are operating at theta state, right? And this is the state where our body healing also happens. DNA repair happens, regeneration of our cartilage cells, increase activity of antioxidants. Some of you might be doing breath work, right? Shreyans conducts this breath work session. Deep abdominal breathing could be any kind of pranayama or even breath work. So any deep abdominal breathing exercises increases the level of feel-good serotonin. That is because when you do that, your brain gets into this theta state. Because your brain gets into theta state, the serotonin neurochemical gets distributed in your body and you start feeling good. And there is enough research and findings published that huge amount of theta brainwaves also help reduce lower back pain. Again, back pain is because of stress, right? And then as you continue to meditate, go into those deeper meditative states, you slow your brain to the theta brainwaves, it produces the kind of chemicals, it produces the kind of positive chemicals, it triggers the right genes, right proteins for you to heal your back pain. And the last set of brainwaves are the slowest ones, but are the most transformational. Brainwaves are the delta brainwaves. So these operate at a frequency of 0.5 to 4 hertz. Some people talk about anywhere between 0 and 4. So this happens in deep sleep. As we all know, deep sleep is therapeutic. Deep sleep heals a lot of things. But unfortunately, due to the vagaries of today's life and the kind of amount of information we get, amount of food that we eat, the type of food that we eat, I don't think any of us gets into that kind of regenerative therapeutic sleep that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers did, right? So that is where meditation is very essential for us again. So it is like in deep sleep, it grows telomeres. Remember, I talked about telomeres. The length of the telomeres indicates aging. It washes away toxic stuff stuck in brain. It improves nerve cell regeneration, increases neuron activity in hippocampus. Again, a whole host of benefits. But the biggest significance for most of us practicing meditation is on the right-hand side, which we'll talk about more about probably tomorrow. So delta brainwaves are associated with a sense of connecting with infinite, a sense of losing our individual self. As I talked about, this is when the different parts of your brain that are responsible for you feeling that you're having a body, those parts of the brain shut down, right? So you lose a sense of being an individual self. And people start getting mystical experiences, transcendent experiences. They feel one with another. This is the state. This is the peak experience state. We will talk about it, the wonders of this more in tomorrow's session when we more talk about the local mind and the universal mind. All right. So we talked about this 4 states of brain, right? So suppose gamma is the fastest, beta is the next lower one, beta is the cause for all the stress, alpha is the calming brainwave, theta is the healing brainwave state, and then delta is more the transformational brainwave state. Deep transformation occurs. So this biophysicist Cade, over 20 years, he recorded the brainwave patterns of people, 4,000 odd people with strong spiritual practices. He invented this device called Mind Mirror, right? So using that, he documented these patterns, brainwave patterns of people. So this is our normal brainwave pattern. If you look at it, when we are involved in some key task, like reading a book, working on the computer, right, driving a vehicle consciously, right, or cooking, whatever it is, the rate of, okay, so this is probably not. So, sorry. So this is our normal brainwave state where we have a high level of beta. If you look at this, there's a high level of beta. So high beta is we are anxious, then low beta is where we are normal, right? And then this is the SMR. So this part is beta. Then we have very little alpha brainwave states, very little theta, and sometimes because there are some parts of our brain which go into delta. So this is a normal brainwave pattern. Look at it, a lot of it is in beta, right? And this is the anxious brainwave pattern. So this is a good pattern to have. This is the anxious brainwave pattern. where you have very high beta. High beta is too much, where you're worried, you're anxious about something, someone not come back on time, or some you are in some deep physical pain. You are in this, your beta is very high. High beta is very high. The amplitudes of beta is very high. Very low alpha, very low theta, very low delta. So this predominates. This is your anxious brain, right? And then looking at thousands of brainwave patterns of thousands of meditators, thousands of people following different spiritual practices, prayer, rituals, singing, anything, right? So he found there is this pattern that is common in those people who've been doing those kind of practices for a long time and who feel balanced emotionally, physically, and are feeling a sense of happiness. So what is this brainwave pattern? So obviously this is like resting pattern, so not much of gamma. Then there is very little, of beta, yes, we keep thinking, right? But what he noticed is a huge alpha. Your alpha waves are very high, and then a little bit of theta, and then there is some delta, right? So his finding says this alpha bridge is what is very important in meditation, right? When we get into meditation, we get into the alpha state, and slowly as we continue to relax, our alpha waves become big. And then there is this theta and delta already happening in our brains, and it gets connected. So this alpha bridge is what connects our conscious brain. The top part of it is conscious mind, whereas the theta and delta are the subconscious and unconscious minds. So having an alpha bridge is important for us to connect our conscious to our intuition, connecting our conscious to our healing ability, right? So this has been one of the biggest insights from this book, and he documents it pretty neatly. So these are conscious mind frequencies having an alpha bridge. So bridge connects your conscious mind to your subconscious and unconscious mind. So that is what this slide talks about, right? So when consciousness changes, brain waves change. So anytime our brain waves change, we become conscious, we become getting into a different level of consciousness, different neural pathways get engaged. In a state of fear, when we are anxious, the alpha bridge disappears, right? So that is why when you start getting into meditation, very important for us not to be anxious. It's very important for us to be relaxed. Another thing, alpha waves, right? Music. There are a lot of papers that are published. Music is relaxing. Music allows you to become in a relaxed state, and that is why Patriji promotes music meditation, right? So music allows you to get into the relaxed mode, gets into your alpha, starts relaxing your thought. Again, you shouldn't be analyzing what kind of music it is. Oh, this is that particular music, that particular raga. Once you're doing it, then again, your thinking mind, your beta starts increasing. So just listening to music soothes your mind, keeps your mind calm, right? So build the alpha, and then slowly, as your alpha continues, as your body relaxes, as your brain relaxes, slowly your alpha bridge increases, and then automatically connected to your inbuilt conscious and subconscious mind. And that's where the theta and delta. Then over time, as you continue to grow deep in meditation, your theta and delta start increasing. And that's what happens. And then once you get into the theta and delta state, there are different set of neurochemicals like the serotonin, like the dopamine and endorphins start flooding your body, and you feel very calm. And over time, you feel very happy, you feel very ecstatic, you feel very blissful. And that is where the anandamide molecules start flooding your body, right? So just focusing your attention, getting into your alpha state, and then deep attention, getting your brain waves much slower, causes all these neurochemical changes in your body, causes your body to heal. As we talked about, a lot of those biomarkers get better, right? Whereas you relax and you get into beta, and that's kind of the fearful brain, right? So emotions create brain states. I think we spoke about it. Brain waves measure the field generated by consciousness, and signals through circuits engaged by love, joy, harmony create elevated energy fields. And they said brain waves reflect our emotion. If you are anxious, your brain waves will show you. If you are peaceful, you are grateful, your brain waves will show you. That kind of creates a certain set of things. Okay. So another important finding amongst meditators. So even Dr. Joe Dispenza, he did thousands of studies. He analyzed 10,000 odd scans of people in meditation during his workshops. His workshops are just 4 days of intense meditation, and they kind of bring out tremendous transformation in people. So he analyzed the brain scans of 10,000 odd people, and then he figured out, and then a lot of other studies also. In fact, there's another study that analyzed people following different meditative practices, right? It could be prayer, it could be affirmations, it could be gratitude, it could be different types of meditations, right? So across all the practices, one of the findings that they found was all types of meditative practices result in a reduction in beta and increasing in delta, right? So this is what happens. So this reduction in beta and then increase in delta. As you see, that's why they call this as an awakened mind pattern. So that is a brain that actually is kind of getting the benefits of meditation. So across all meditative practice, which is significant, right? So that's the deep science behind it. That's the evidence that science has produced. And because the interdependence between the brain regions get reduced, there is this dissolution of an isolated self, and that is tying the science to the metaphysical. All of us have heard about oneness. All of us have heard people being united with God, right? So all of us have heard about people getting into that feeling of universal energy. What is all that? Because the parts of your brain that give you that sense of self become silent, because you're into the deep theta states or delta states, right? So that is when this whole separatedness, the whole sense of I, mine, ego vanishes. And there's a shift in consciousness from you being a separate entity to you being part of a universal field or a non-local universal field. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. So that is where that particular state, if you look at it, right? And I've been through those, and a lot of us who've been practicing meditation have been through those. That's a state where you kind of have this sense of detachment, have this sense of calmness. It's not that you don't crave for that particular idea. No, that I don't. I mean, it's not about craving for a particular feeling. It's about deep acceptance. Everything is fine, right? So it's about equanimity. So that is the state that meditation gets you in, meditative practices gets you in. That is the meditative brain. That is the state of meditative brain that relates to the metaphysical or the spiritual concepts of oneness, God, universal acceptance, deep acceptance, and all that, right? And this enormous amount of delta, results in mystical experiences. What are those mystical experiences? What happens during those mystical experiences? And what happens after mystical experiences? All of us have gone through those mystical experiences one time or the other. So there are cases where we've been through at least one of those transcendent states at different points of time. For example, I've been through that state even before I got into meditation, just because I was reading a fantastic book that was giving me all that information I was waiting for. And that transcendent state was just like few minutes. You just forget where you are, your whole body pulsates, your brain slows down, and you get that immense feeling of bliss, completely flooded by that anandamide molecule, right, or the neurochemical. And that's a moment of transcendence. All of you must have felt either seeing a newborn baby or getting that wonderful epiphany, oh wow, that's how it works, right? Or going and just enjoying being in nature. So those are moments we will explore, we will dive deeper into what those are, those mystical moments, what happens when, what is the concept of non-local mind, what is the concept of universal self. So we'll talk about all that, along with a whole host of wonderful, real, true life stories from people who have gone through those experiences, and how it has shaped their lives and how it has helped shape life outside of them as well. Tomorrow's session. All right. So with that, we will. That closes ends the lecture part of it. I hope it wasn't boring. It wasn't like that boring lecture. I hope your body did not generate those stress-causing chemicals as you heard these 2 hours. I hope the knowledge that you've got has been uplifting. You are in a higher elevated energy field, radiating all that. I'm sure you will digest all this much smoother over tonight. Now I'm okay to answer any few questions that we have in the last few minutes. We'll close sharply at 7:30. Any other questions we'll probably take up tomorrow, please.
It was a wonderful session, sir. It was very good to see a lot of people flowing with the comments. And absolutely, there was no stress, and we've been enjoying, especially there's testimonials that were in a story format. It really had a good impact.
Those make a difference, exactly.
So we have Ms. Ranjini. Please unmute yourself. Mr. Tilakmar, please unmute yourself. You can ask the question.
Hello, Namaskar ji. I'm from Lucknow, Tilak Kumar Manucha. I just want to know about the single cell, which was at the time of conception, and its life was only for 10 minutes or so. So that is known as the God particle or particle, as far as I know. I may be wrong or right, I do not know, but that still remains as it is, or it too also changes, as Mr. Krupa has told us that every cell changes. So I just want to know about that.
Yes, the single cell, the God particle, I mean, I'm sure I'm not an expert in that, but I've read about it. So that is the cell that has evolved into all of us, right? So just like the fetus forms with a single cell in the womb of a mother, right? So there is one cell, then it grows, it adds more cells, consciousness happens first, and then brain happens, right? In a fetus. So very similar. That cell has grown into multiple. We all keep growing cells. So that God particle, one theory of evolution is we all evolved from that God particle. So, all right. Any more questions?
Yes. So we have Mr. Ravi Sriram.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yes. So my question was in specific to one point that you mentioned. So you were mentioning about a few, analysis that was made based on different types of meditative practices, right? So, so when we meditated even a while ago, so the procedure that we followed is we cross our legs, we put our hands within the hands, and then we concentrate on our breath. Was there any detailed analysis made about the other meditation practices where the procedure followed is slightly different, where they sit in a posture, but then the hands don't cross? And some actually chant something while others concentrate only on a breath pattern, different breath patterns. So
yes,
I was expecting some more light on this because I was very curious about this, because usually many people say that if you're practicing one way of meditation, do not step into other. But my own personal thought is that, everything is towards a single objective. So why not practice if you have belief in that?
Correct. Absolutely. Our belief shapes our experience. Definitely, sir. See, all these are different approaches to meditation, right? Your posture. So there is a certain set of science behind what we are doing, anapanasati meditation, right? What Gautam Buddha has said. There are different types of meditation. There are different types of chanting that happens. Everything, all those are different approaches to change your brain states as per neuroscience. Because all those start with the importance of concentration or attention. Different practices allow you, for example, in the West, I know there are 15-minute meditations. In just 15 minutes, people are able to develop concentration because of whether they chant some word and all that. But they stop only there, right? As I mentioned, their alpha increases, maybe a little bit of theta, but not the transformational or the delta. So the answer to your question, sir, is if your question is, was there any research done in the specific posture and approach that we are practicing in the meditation that we are doing vis-a-vis other approaches? There is one PhD thesis that one of our masters has done recently. It's on anapanasati meditation. I'm not sure whether it talks about it. But having said that, all approaches, the findings that I mentioned was that particular study did this analysis across all or multiple meditative practices, whether you clasp your hands or not, whether you chant a mantra or you see light and all that, irrespective of it, ultimate goal is they get the brain to that particular state where the ratio of your delta to beta is high. That's what the data that the study says.
Thank you, sir. So we have Ms. Madhuri with us.
Good evening, sir. So I have 3 questions. Sir, you said about healing, whether it is remotely or local. Sir, whether healing can be done, as I heard from other gurus, the healing should not be done, they said. How this healing process happens, or how can we do healing or not? How it works, sir?
Yeah, so the best part is about healing yourself. So whatever we talk about, it's about you healing yourself. Having said that, there are methods. All of us know there are methods where I talked about a study where there was remote healing done, right? So because of the energy fields. So all those exist as per science, but the preferred approach is for us to heal ourselves, right? And there is a strong science with remote healing as well, just because we are non-local, connected energetically and all that, right? So healing happens, and there is a deep science behind it. There are different processes behind that. But when we talk about self-healing, when we talk about meditation, it's all about self-healing. And that is what we always mention. And there are different methods for different things to happen. It's ethical or non-ethical, it's not a question, but there is science behind it. There are people who do it, right? For us, meditation is what is our method of healing.
Please unmute.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello? Yes, sir. So self-healing is better, and we so it is like we can't heal others, you say, right?
You can.
Yeah.
The science says you can. Whether you want to do that, this depends on you, right? So self-healing is what is prescribed. So all of us, but like Patrici says, you do meditation, you heal yourself. You teach someone else meditation, he heals. That's a permanent. Otherwise, you are creating this bond of dependence, right? So you always look at someone or something else to heal you. So there is so much of deep science behind healing, behind how meditation causes healing, that we talked about it, right? So it's about self-healing. There's no need for you to heal others. The best thing is you can talk to them about this science, talk to them about this practice of meditation. You do it. This is what happens. You sit in meditation, go deep, 20 minutes, your brain waves move into theta and delta. You start healing yourself. That's what all this science talks about. All right, Charlie, are there any questions on the chat window that we need to answer as well?
Yes, sir. We had a particular question, especially about the alpha beta waves. So if you can explain in detail, or can you repeat the concept? That was the main question which had come up.
Okay. So is there any way we have reached alpha state of mind? So alpha is the brain state you are in when you feel a sense of relaxation, right? When you feel that sense of relaxation, you are sleeping in your sofa, having that cup of coffee, or sleeping in your sofa, listening to music, right? So just when you lie down, just you're beginning to sleep, is that kind of relaxation is what is alpha state, right? When we start doing meditation, when we close our eyes, like Patrici says, you close your eyes, that itself will provide you immense healing, because it cuts off a lot of visual and somatosensory information, right? You close your eyes, you get into alpha state. That's why it's important in meditation to close it. I know that in the West, there are a lot of open eyes, mindful meditation and all that, but closing your eyes gets you into alpha state immediately. And then as you continue meditation, as you continue to bring your attention onto your breath, you slowly get into theta states, your brain starts slowing down, right? That's when your good neurochemicals start flooding your body, you start feeling better, right? And then slowly you get deeper into delta waves. That's when you start getting these mystical experiences, a lot of transformations start happening. Your mind, your thinking brain completely calms down. You start getting intuitive messages. You start connecting to the universal field, right? You start, tomorrow we'll talk about precognition, metaphysical experience and all that. So that's pretty much, so this is the science behind what happens in your brain when you sit and meditate. But the process is very simple. Just clasp your hands, close your eyes, cross your legs, just start focusing on your breath, and everything else happens as it is. You don't need specific chakra healing. You don't need specific DNA activations. DNAs are all activated. You don't need specific third eye activation experience. Everything happens. All you need to do is believe, get deep into meditation. Everything else happens, as I talked about several cases and several biomarkers of health in today's talk. And the book covers a lot more about it. I hope that was useful.
Yes, sir. So another question, sir. What is the difference between brain and mind?
Good question. So brain is the hardware. Mind is all that runs on the hardware. All your thoughts, emotions. The software that runs on the brain is mind. Right? And again, we talk about the local mind. Tomorrow we'll talk about the non-local mind as well. So I hope that's the difference. Mind is a collection of thoughts, emotions, feelings. Brain is the physical thing that we spoke about.
Yeah, it was such an easy answer. Like we can easily relate it, the hardware and the software, about the brain and the mind. Thank you, sir. So we have Mr. Acharya ji from Nepal. Acharya ji, we are not able to hear you.
Could you hear?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Pitambar Acharya from Nepal and now in Kathmandu, working in Tribhuvan University. And I was in search of such a session on mind, and I'm very happy and grateful to God to meet Sai Sagar first session today. I am a novice meditator. Just started from yesterday's on Buddha CEO. I'm very happy to get chance to this, and there is no query, just gratifications. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. So we have Mr. J with us.
First, thanks for the wonderful session, sir. A lot of insights. Very grateful. I have one question. Are there any significance on dreams? Is dreams good or bad? What does the dream signify? Any insights would be helpful.
Yes, so dreams are another state of consciousness, right? Again, tomorrow we'll talk about a story where dreams, someone got a dream which turned out to be a premonition of some disease, right? But having said that, it's very difficult to analyze dreams. One of the common things Patanjali says is do not analyze dream experience. The same thing, do not analyze meditation experience as well. So yes, dreams are relevant, but then dreams in the deep delta state, right? So again, during sleep, again, we go through those. Alpha is just before we sleep. Theta is when during a rapid eye movement sleep, and then delta is deep sleep. So dreams during delta sleep have some kind of, it almost relates to the mystical experience, the transcendent experience that we have, but it's very difficult for us to identify whether I got the dream during theta or delta, right? So that is why it's always not a good idea to analyze dreams. But yes, if you continue to have recurring dreams about something, it's good to act on it, or good to either feel good or bad about it and do something about it. But then again, one of the common things is there's no need to analyze dreams, but then again, there is a whole science behind dream analysis. There are people, there are scientists, there are spiritual people who kind of focus completely on the dream area as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. J. So we had a person who has messaged asking what is the abbreviation of SMR, which was shown in the chart, the brainwave chart. Yeah,
it's sensory motor rhythm, SMR. So that is the slowest part of the beta waves that are essential for the body to function. Even when you are completely silent, there is that amount of frequency, beta frequency, that will always have. So your beta waves in that particular chart will never be zero. It will be that little minimum.
Yes, sir.
So there's this question that says, this means in 24 hours, we can feel all states of brain waves from gamma to delta. Yeah, of course, if you are constantly stressed and anxious, no, sir, or no, madam. So you'll probably be more in beta throughout the day, right? It's about you, if you're practicing some relaxation, yes. So you can be in different states in different parts of 24 hours. Whether you are depends on the state of mind you are.
So can we have some more questions, sir?
Yes.
So we have Mr. Srikanth.
Yeah. Hi, Srikanth here.
Yes, Srikanth.
How are you? Long time.
Mm.
Like great session. Just wanted to understand one part, right? So, how much time it normally takes to go from this normal alpha state to theta states? If I start, let's say, if I'm a novice meditation practitioner. To get to the theta frequency or the delta frequency, like how much, let's say if I practice, if there is a module that says that you practice 30 minutes a day over a period of 10 years, just an example, how much time it takes to get to that state of levels, the frequencies, just I wanted to know, because there are when I breathe now, I've been meditating for a year now, so now don't get the thoughts. I've improved from what it was to what it is today, but I just want to understand, to get to that kind of levels, is there any...
So Srikanth, I know you are a music person, so how much time, the time it takes to render a very complex piece of song or music, right? For an expert, it happens, they just get on, let's say, playing a violin, they just take the violin and compose it, play it very well, right? Whereas for a beginner, it probably takes some time, couple of rehearsals, and then he'll be able to do that. They'll have to do a lot more practice and do it. This is very similar. That's a skill. Meditation is also a skill that we are learning, trying to train our mind, right? So just like exactly what you said, in the beginning, it takes a lot of time. For me as well, it took probably a few months for me to get rid of my thinking. Thinking during meditation was always there, right? Whereas now, after so many years of meditation and then getting all this wisdom, getting all the energies, for me, if I sit now, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, I'm off the thinking state, right? I'm probably into, definitely into alpha, definitely into theta, right? And then sometimes within 20 minutes, and in fact, it's so funny. Sometimes when I allocate more time, it takes a longer time for me to get deeper into meditation. But when I have some, let's say I have this lecture coming up, or when I need to step out in 20 minutes, I sit and do meditation only for 15 or 20 minutes, your brain automatically focuses, just like the emergency, right? When you are in this situation, this emergency, your brain automatically focuses much better. So that's what happens. So the answer to your question, it depends on the person, and obviously it depends on the practice it takes, and you yourself answered it. So if you're having too many thoughts, it takes some time, and over time you'll probably get to those theta states much faster than you used to do earlier. And that is why we always say it's always better to start meditating at an younger age. I always suggest before our youngsters' brain get populated with all those anxious beta waves, it's better for them to start practicing getting into the theta and delta much earlier than later.
Thank you, sir. So, dear friends, a lot of members were continuously asking about the record of this session. Yes, so it is available on the Pyramid Valley YouTube channel. So, we just posted the link in the chat box. You can have a look into the Mind to Matter Day 1 session. And
all right.
I think it is time to. So, shall we continue tomorrow, sir?
Yes, yeah. So I think we'll continue tomorrow. So thanks very much, dear friends. I hope it was useful. I'm sure all of you will go to sleep thinking about alpha, theta, and delta. Stay away from the beta. All right, and you'll talk about your prefrontal cortex rather than third eye. So it's basically a change of terminology from a belief-based science to evidence-based neuroscience. In fact, I also uncovered one word during this course across those books. There is something called neurotheology, and I think I should call myself a neurotheologist. What is neurotheology? Neurotheology is the application of neuroscience to spiritual practices. So it's a field looks like it. So there are a lot of people who take all these spiritual practices and try and look at it from the lens of modern science, right? Neuroscience and medical science, and then arrive at conclusions on why this is happening, why the spiritual experience is happening, right? And they try to avoid it. And then I think I'm always been interested in that, and that's what I am probably now. So friends, thank you very much. It was great sharing a lot of information to you, and I hope it was useful, and I hope I didn't flood your brain with too much of information. But again, the book is fantastic. Feel free to read it. Tomorrow, please come back for another wonderful session. At least I got a lot of insights on mystical experiences, transcendence, connecting to the non-local mind, making things happen externally. So today we talked about how we create, how we use our mind to create matter within our body, physical body, as well as our emotional body, right, in terms of behavior. Tomorrow we'll talk about how you can use mind to create matter in real life. How do you kind of make use of, how do you train yourself to cause synchronicities, right? Train yourself to cause things outside of your physical body. All right, and then we will also understand a bit more of science, what happens in meditation to the brain and to the physiology, and especially during these mystical experiences. All right, so please join me back at 5 p.m. IST tomorrow evening. So till then, thank you very much. Goodbye and good night, my dear friends. Thank you, Shalini.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, dear friends. So if you would like to go back and see the video again, so we have just posted the link. And as I said, so let us just think about what kind of waves and where are we. Yes, it is quite fascinating to know about it. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.